Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Hell Money Pod. We are coming to you from Austin, Texas.
Yep.
At a nightclub named
Superstition,
that's right. We are joined this time. I, of course, am your host, Casey Rodamore, along with your other host, Aaron Boop. And this is our lovely guest, Nifty Nay of BTC++, Lightning, and just general OG Bitcoiner fame.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm a big fan of Hell Money.
Nice.
We wanted you on for a long time. I mean, I feel like even since the beginning of the podcast,
Oh, yeah,
I was
when
like,
we
we should
made-
have Nifty on.
When we made lists of guests,
Oh.
desired guests, you're always on
You've
there.
always been on the list. You've always been on the list. We just had to come to Texas to do it.
Yeah, you gotta come find me in my natural habitat.
Yeah,
It makes
yeah.
sense. It's got
Yeah.
a nice, niceness to it. You come to town and get me on the pod. I like it. Yeah.
You're a busy person. You have your fingers in a lot of pots.
I feel like I have my fingers in a lot of pots. I don't know I'm necessarily busy, but yeah.
Yeah. I remember you started doing conferences. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, that sounds absolutely horrible. Like I couldn't imagine trying to keep everything going and juggling everything. And I think that you're naturally well suited to it because you sort of you kind of don't let things get to you. You just kind of let it, you set everything up. You try to get it to go as good as you can. And then when things go wrong, you're like, oh, that's okay, whatever, Whereas I'd be freaking out. I'd be losing my shit. So I think you have a very good constitution for such things.
I think that's really true. But I think the thing is, you're when things go wrong, you just let it go. I'm I don't think things go wrong, but maybe that's part of it.
They're just happy little accidents.
Things just happen. I don't know. We move on to the next thing. I can't, yeah. Maybe this is the other thing about me. I feel like I just forget about what has happened, bad or good. And so I'm yeah, of course we're doing another conference in 8 weeks. I did this spring.
You're just surrounded in a room with blood splatters, dead attendees. You're yeah, run it back turbo.
Yeah, it's how much worse can it get? Let's go. I mean, I don't know what happened. Let's just clean it up now. We got a mess on our hands, what's next? Yeah.
I think it helps also that BTC++ is very specialized. It's
That's
people
true.
come for a specific purpose. You kind of have, each time you have your specific theme. I feel like it's, and that's kind of, we do conferences as well. And it helps that it's constrained by ordinals in that way. Although after doing one conference, just myself, I would never do one again. I could never, literally, thank God Arthur and Nolcha came in. We're at a Nolcha Shows event now. It'll be happening later tonight. But if that had not come in, your assessment of, oh my God, it's going to be miserable is absolutely correct.
I also think BTC++ has something really special going for it because, people want to present, they want to go to presentations, they want to talk. But also what they really want to do is they want to hang out with other developers and talk.
Yeah.
So there's this built-in content 24/7 that the attendees bring and take care of. And really, if you just got everybody who was going to BTC++ and had 4 rooms and no schedule and it was oh yeah, you guys can just talk and hang out and kibbutz, that'd be great for everybody too.
And I actually think people might prefer it if I did that to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm usually the way the conference is organized is I try and do 1 or 2 days of programming. So there's maybe a few panels, mostly talks. I try and get as many workshops as possible so people can do hands-on stuff. And then the last day or two is just okay, here's some space and it's hackathon time. There will be a stage available in 24 hours for you to stand up and talk on if you want to, kind of thing. And I feel I'm really bad about getting prizes or whatever, but most people don't care. They're just okay, I have a thing I want to work on. All the people are here. Let's make this
They
thing
want to work on
happen.
it. They want to win. And it's the spiritual accomplishment.
Yeah. Or they want to get up and show off what they've made, really. I think I need to invest in one of those stage hooks, for the next event.
The gong.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I heard great things about BTC++ this last year. When it was a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, it just finished the first week of May. I don't know.
Yeah, because we were in Hong Kong at the time. Otherwise, but there were quite a few ordinals people from my team that were there, and I heard really, really good things. And generally, what I heard was, that they had this idea. A lot of them, ordinals people, the ones that I was talking to, it was their first Bitcoin developers conference.
No way.
Yeah. So maybe they had gone to, Bitcoin Miami or whatever, but they had never this was their first time kind of getting into Bitcoin dev. And so they were very nervous. I knew a lot of people who were nervous coming, being should I say that I work on ordinals? Should I whatever? And the takeaway that I heard from all of them was that everyone is so much nicer in person than they are on Twitter. And the conversations were so much more productive. And I heard great things about, I feel like there's a lot of conversation right now about all these various soft forks like Opcat, Covenants, etc. Like, what do you? What was your take on the discourse around that at BTC++ or in general?
Well, also, like, how has the discourse been evolving?
Yeah.
And then what is it like now?
Yeah.
I feel like Bitcoin was like a step change in the discourse online, but maybe that's like the thing that I'm embedded in. Like, I think one of the big things that happened is.
And when was the first BTC++?
The first one happened in Austin 2 years ago in June. So we're not even 2 years away from the very first one.
Wow.
Since then, I've run 6, 4 countries, 3 continents. Like, third one in Austin just happened a few weeks ago. We're doing the 7th one ever in Berlin in October. Anyways.
Nice.
Yeah.
October, Berlin.
Berlin, you gotta
Put
be
on your
there.
calendars.
Yeah. 10th to 12th. We're talking about Ecash. I've already sold like more than 25% of the tickets, which is like I've never sold that many tickets, like more than 2 weeks before the event kind of thing. So it's very exciting. Yeah. But I'm sorry, your question was like
The discourse.
The discourse around
And like and
consensus,
discourse around
soft
Bitcoin and
forks.
Bitcoin and soft forks and
Yeah. I feel like so one thing that I was really happy about is that I tried to get one representative from every opcode proposal that's been made in the last, I would say like 2.5 years or so. I even like convinced Peter Todd to come, who like maybe most people have probably forgotten about it. He did like an op expire was like his.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know if it was a serious proposal, but I was like really into it. So I was like, Peter, come talk about op expire.
It seems useful. Op expire seems useful.
It
Although
seems very useful, especially for Lightning.
Yeah. Although the mempool logic sounds heinous because, Bitcoin core nodes right now, they accept transactions. They're always, if they're valid now, they're always going to be valid.
Exactly.
They have to do weird things like, what if a transaction pays a high fee or a fee that's high but not enough for it to get mined and it's probably going to expire?
Yeah. Yes, there's lots of edge cases around it. But in my mind, I was like, it's an opcode. Like, it counts. You know what I mean? Like, if you have to be here. And apologies to anyone whose opcodes I forgot. I tried. I really did.
All opcodes are valid.
There were definitely people who couldn't make it, but I tried as much as possible. Like, Jeremy Rubin wasn't able to come. But I did as best as I could to like find someone who can, I think, represent that like argument, if that makes, as best as possible. And I did something a little sneaky. I got all of those like kind of a cohort of maybe like 12 people, and I put them all in a room the day before the actual event started. And
That is sneaky.
I didn't lock the door.
That's cabal shit.
Yeah. I put them all in a room, and I was like, you guys. Like there was no agenda. There's nothing. I didn't even sit in. Maybe I should have. Whatever. But like Super Testnet. I had Super Testnet invited because he was around, and he was like too nervous to go hang out with these like OGs and stuff. So I had
I thought Super Testnet didn't get nervous.
I don't know. He was like hanging out by himself, and I walked in. Like they were like talking. They've been talking for like an hour or two, and I was like, Super, like if you want, you can go like participate in the conversation. Like. I'm sure because he was doing a lot of BitVM stuff, right?
Yeah.
And like he seems like a good representative from that project to like hang out and participate. I don't know what they're talking about, and he's just like, I don't know. Like I got up and like went and sat in the corner in the room, sort of like sheepishly.
Aww.
Yeah, it was kind of cute to see. Anyways, I got them all together, and I think like Rusty they all like walked through their proposals and like talked together for I want to say like I don't know, maybe only 6 hours. We went and got barbecue at lunchtime. Everyone seemed like they were having an amazing time, and then the next day like set them loose at the conference, if that makes sense. And they all got to present. They all had their presentations. They all did their presentations for the first 2 days, and then the last 2 days were like hacking on whatever you wanted, basically. Anyways, but like I think kind of what came out of that is like that opportunity for everyone to like sit down at a table and just talk about what they wanted, what they liked, what their vision was, why they cared about what they cared about, which is like such a big part, I feel like, of moving forward, like any conversation. What are we actually trying to accomplish? What do we care about? Why do we care about it? And I feel like that opportunity to talk to each other like gave them like this like kind of clarity around like, okay, like we all sort of understand where everyone is standing now, and we've all kind of like I think come to a place where like, okay, we think that this is like sort of the thing that we should do next or whatever.
Do you want to summarize the,
I was gonna say,
the
what is
opcode
that?
proposals? Like what were the proposals?
So there was we had Opcat, I had Rindale, and I think Tyler came from they're like the top rate wizard company people.
Yeah, they said they strategically brought Tyler and Rindal and not Udi and Eric.
Yeah, it was great. The developer conference though. They brought the honestly they brought the right people. I think it was great. So they got to come participate. We had
Wait. What is Opcat?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
For the people at home, You
have 2 pieces, 2 things. You put them together, and now they're one thing. That is opcat. That is what opcat does.
And these two things would be arrays of bytes.
Yeah, it'd be 2 pieces of data.
So you have the bytes 1, 2, 3 and the bytes 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
And then you have the single byte string 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what it does.
Yep.
So okay, but the real question is, why is this useful? Like, why are people so interested in this? And the answer is, if you can concatenate things together, then you can hash them.
Right. Indeed.
That is
right.
the whole reason that you want it.
Yeah.
Is you want to be able
That's
to
actually a
take-
really good
That
explanation.
is a very good.
Like I knew that. If maybe you could have dug me out that out of me, but not in such a summarized form. Like people want to concatenate things to hash them.
Yes, that's literally.
They don't want to concatenate them to test if they're equal to something. Sometimes maybe they want to do that. But most of the
occasionally.
time they want to concatenate them, hash them, and then check
and
the
then
hash.
compare the hash.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna compare the hash result, maybe. I think actually, I think that's like the whole thing.
Yeah, you want to concatenate things, hash them, and then check the hash.
Yeah.
Or check it via a signature.
Via signature later.
You
There's
wanna
other
see,
things
like,
you
does
can
the
do with
signature
the
sign
hash
this
later.
hash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's things you can do with the hash later, but you're literally concatenating things because you want a hash. And you want to be able to compose the hash is the thing, right? Like you want to be able to have like a various amounts of data inside of it. So you have a whole bunch of different pieces of data. You need to take all those disparate, separate pieces of data and put them in one big piece that then you can take that one big piece and put that into the hash function.
Right.
Because there's no way that you can call hash on like various pieces. You need it at one. It's like a one-shot thing, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Yep.
And so in order to do a one-shot, you have to pull all the pieces together first and then do the one-shot like
Has anybody
hash on
talked
it.
about a streaming digest?
I feel like I've seen. So now
So
that
you
I'm
could, like,
saying this, I
like
feel
in-
like I've seen a proposal for
Like,
it.
because in most programming languages, when you have a hash function, what you have is you have this hasher that you can feed data to it sequentially and then get the digest. So it seems very similar to concatenating things and then hashing them, is feeding them
exactly the
sequentially to a
same.
hasher and then getting the digest.
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like I think like
Now I
there
wonder
was a
why
thing.
nobody's talked about that, because then
There
that
might have been. I feel like there might have been.
because that sidesteps the any concern about the stack size limit.
Right,
If
it
you're
does.
just feeding things into a hasher and not constructing some potentially large string of bytes.
Right.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
could be your next project.
No, definitely not. I'd rather drink poison and jump off a bridge than participate in Bitcoin politics.
Yeah. So one of the proposals that came out of Bitcoin this month, just this month, Rusty Russell kind of launched his BIP and his proposal project at Bitcoin++. So that was kind of our like
Which is?
big headline. It's called the Great Script Restoration Project.
And does this encompass other BIPs, or is it a separate?
No, it's a new one.
Okay.
It's brand new.
Yep.
All new ideas by Mr. Rusty Russell himself. The general idea is
You're a Rusty Russell fan.
I'm
You're
a
big-
huge Rusty Russell fan. Yeah. I worked with him for a long time on Lightning. So I got to see how his brain works
Yep.
for a long time. He's brilliant. He's definitely, I think, one of the smartest minds working in Bitcoin, present company excluded.
You're talking about me, right?
Yes, definitely. So Rusty kind of got nerd sniped, I think, by Jeremy Rubin's CTV project, which we haven't talked about, but we should come back to it. Speaking of hashing stuff, Rusty was like looking at CTV, and he was also looking at OpVault. OpVault really got to Rusty.
And what's up, CTV?
Yeah, so CTV stands for Check Template Verify. It used to be Op Secure the Bag. That's not relevant. It's just kind of funny.
Yep.
The general idea with OpCTV is that, remember we were talking about hashing and like certain pieces of data you wanted to hash together? OpCTV is like, what if we take a transaction, which is literally just pieces of data, and we take these four, might be five, but like 4 pieces of data out of that transaction and we hash them. And then the only way that you can spend Bitcoin that's locked up to that hash is if you use a transaction that will rehash exactly to that.
Right. So essentially, it's
It's a hash check.
yeah, but I
It's a
mean,
hash check.
I think that's a
Introspection plus hash check.
Right,
But
I
it's
mean-
introspecting only on like 4 fields.
right. It's checking that some fields of the transaction are what you expect,
Yes.
like the destinations,
Yes.
the amounts.
No.
No, amounts aren't in
They're
OpCTV.
not in there. I don't think so.
Oh, okay, interesting.
We did have
no,
a whole.
they must be.
We did have a
I don't
whole
think
deep
they are.
dive.
I think they are, because
I don't think they are.
if amounts, the amount of the outputs,
I don't think it is. I could be wrong.
but then you could.
Maybe it's the output value is in there. Maybe the
It's got to
output
be the output
field
values,
is in
because if
there.
you want to do something like upvault and you have like a destination you need to make sure that you're sending the right amount.
No,
to
but
that
this is the thing
destination.
about OpVault, okay? So like, yeah, so OpVault uses OpCTV to say where you can send the Bitcoin to.
Right.
But OpVault has to do like, this is great. This kind of gets into why we need the great script restoration project, or at least why it's like why you can kind of like see why Rusty like ended up there going through this stuff. So OpVault, you're supposed to be like checking that the values are the right thing, right? OpVault though, okay, so OpVault as an opcode is implemented in C++ code in Bitcoin Core. So like the whole idea is that there's certain operations. So like in theory, you should be able to do those like operations that they wrote into C++ in Bitcoin script. So in theory, there's an iteration of Bitcoin script where you can write a vault without having to change Bitcoin Core's code and hard coding that particular logic into everyone's.
Right.
You
And
can have
brief summary of what OpVault is.
So OpVault is this idea that you can send money to an address, and then if someone tries to move the money out of that address, there's a period of time, a window, when you can send it to one of those CTV defined contracts, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like,
So you can the only way you can move money about this address is to send it to a waiting room.
right.
And then after some amount of time elapses,
Yeah.
you can take it out of the waiting room, or you can pull the trap door and it goes down.
Falls into the
your
into
super
the
secure
super
cold
secure thing.
storage.
You hope
Yeah.
those keys are more
Yeah.
secure than the other keys
Right,
were
right.
that got you into the situation.
Yeah, it's
in the
tattooed
first
between
place.
your butt cheeks or something. Yeah. And so like you secure
I don't
your
know if that's the way you want to do it.
Oh, I mean nobody sees inside my butt cheeks. All right, it's very secure.
That's what you think.
So you can store your Bitcoin and then you can withdraw it, but then there's like a waiting period where after it gets withdrawn, you can still claw it back to this other address.
And so they call this reactive security though, because you have to be watching the chain to see that someone's trying to move your money
Right.
and reactively send the next one. So Rusty has like a whole nother thing about like, because Lightning is like this. A lot of Lightning has a similar reactive security property in terms of if someone puts something on the chain, you have to react to it.
Right, yeah.
And so you always have to be watching the chain. So it's like, okay, at what level of like, how much like extra infrastructure are you adding that has to be up and running in order for the security to actually be worth anything? If
Yes.
that makes sense, it's kind of like one of the things. Anyways, that's like a side conversation. It's sort of like an aside. It's like another property of like this like vault construction in general. But one of the things about vaults is they actually need to be able to check amounts. So they're verifying that the amounts that you're sending are like correct or something.
Right.
But one of the reasons that they had to implement the OpVault like proposal in C++ code, and this is new information for me that I learned like this year, which is crazy because I've been in Bitcoin for like almost over half a decade at this point, and I'm like, how is this like new information? But so op-add is like an opcode. You can't add Satoshi amount values using op-add as currently written in Bitcoin Core. And the reason for that is that you can at most add 2 4-byte numbers.
Oh.
Satoshi values are how many bytes?
They are 54 bit.
They're 8 bytes, basically. The
They're
field is
54
8
bits.
bytes. Okay,
But yeah, they're 8
54
bits.
bytes.
The ordinals database has to store sat ranges. And so for compression, we only store them as like the exact number of bits that they need.
Are possible. Okay,
But
54,
yes, indeed,
right.
yeah.
But 54 bits, notably, is more than 4
More than 4
bytes, which
bytes.
is 32 bits,
Indeed,
right? Yeah,
yep.
so they're larger. So you can't
You
actually
can't
add them.
That's fucked up.
It's fucked up. So
Yeah.
of course, like if you want to make this like vault code work, you have to go like actually implement that logic into Bitcoin Core and ship it to everyone, hope there's no bugs, etc.
Right.
And then it's available to everyone, etc., etc. But Rusty's project is like, that's kind of like dumb. Let's just fix the problem of not being able to add 2 numbers together.
Right. And you would also need transaction introspection, which we don't have currently. Like you need
maybe
because you can't get the
with
amounts of a
CTV
transaction.
stuff. Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you, introspection is basically like, here's a transaction form. What's written on the form?
Can the transaction look at itself
Yeah.
when it's being executed?
Like literally, what's on the form?
Yep.
What's on there? What does it say on the amount field? Can you tell me? So while the script is running, it can be like, oh, this amount is X. And you can't do that right now, which is kind of funny.
Yep.
I don't know. Anyways, that's what introspection means. It's not that fancy. I mean, maybe it is. Anyways, I forgot where we were going with this. CTV.
The Rusty's.
Oh, the upvolt thing. Okay, so Rusty's like, okay, like CTV wants to make hashes, but they're making very limited choices around what you can hash for reasons that they're worried that you don't want to create too much hashing to happen, which can be like a denial of service via computation. So if you create a transaction that too much compute power has to run in order to like do all the hashes required by that opcode, then you have a problem because every single node that gets that transaction is going to execute that script. And if all of them have to do 1 million hashes, all of a sudden the entire Bitcoin network with one transaction is stuck just like
doing billions of hashes.
And everyone's like, what happened to Bitcoin? Why are all the nodes stuck? And it's like, well, there was that one transaction. And transactions, like anyone can write a transaction. Yes. Anyone can write a script. You just need to own some Bitcoin, etc. But you can it's kind of a cool thing about Bitcoin is you like when you write a Bitcoin script and you send money to it, or when you spend money from it, I should say, you basically convince every node in the network to execute code you wrote. Which is cool. I mean, it's like global computation, except, I don't know, not Bitcoin-y. I don't know. Anyways, so Rusty's like, okay, clearly one of the problems here is like we can't add numbers together. And there's been other suggestions of proposals of how to make it such that we can add like 64-bit numbers together. Wouldn't that be cool? But they're kind of clunky. Like one of the things you have to worry about when you have like 64-bit or 32-bit, whatever numbers is overflow, right? What if I add these two numbers together and all of a sudden I need 65 bits to keep track of how many numbers there are.
Right.
And then it's like in script, how do you deal with that? Does it like return like the value and also like a true false, but then you have two stacked values. It's just kind of like everything that you do around it is like, I would say like semi-clunky.
Yep.
So Rusty's like, okay, let's go like, I don't know. Let's go a little bit as far down as we can in the stack, so to speak. And what if we made it such that you could add any numbers you wanted together of any length? What if we remove all the length list restrictions?
Right.
We
so
say
you have
like
variable length integers.
Variable length integers. Forget the 520 byte like limit per stack item. Like we'll just as big as you want it, etc. But let's like look at what the actual problem is. Like where like the actual fear around all these things is like computation, right? Like how much computer power is it going to take to add enormous numbers together? And so he's actually done the work and gone through and on his laptop figured out how much computation each of these things takes, and is like basically writing like he calls it like a var ops budget, which is how much actual computation does each of these things take depending on like the input size, like multiplication, left
so
shift, right shift,
adding big numbers costs more if the numbers are bigger.
Exactly. And like figuring out like where are the actual costs of like running a hash function. Is running a hash function as much or more than like a left shift or a right shift? And like when do those operations become more expensive? It's like, oh, whenever you need to allocate more memory, that sort of thing. And so he's done the hard work of figuring out like what are all of the actual costs of running script. And so he's actually like rewriting, my understanding is his bit proposal and he's like bringing code, because Rusty doesn't bring proposals without code. He's like, it's not a real proposal unless it like actually is a proposal like to change it. He's like went through and benchmarked all of the different opcodes and is making like basically like giving you a budget. So the idea is that when you have a transaction with like a script, your script will have like a generic budget. And it's kind of like, we kind of have something like this in Bitcoin right now. It's called SIGOPS limit.
Right. And this is only counting the number of signature verifications that you do?
Yeah. And so Rusty's going through and figuring out, okay, like what's our actual computation budget that I can just give everyone? We'll just give everyone the same budget. And if you go over it, like your transaction gets kicked out, like it's not valid. And we'll make it high enough that 95% of like, or even 99.99% of people doing like normal stuff, even like slightly crazy stuff, probably won't hit it. But if you're like trying to do something
each transaction
insane,
has the same budget, or each block has the same budget?
These are great detail questions.
Okay, got it.
I don't know the answer to, but I'm sure it's in the BIP that he's posted since the conference. And the idea is this will like allow us to bring back like all these opcodes. So one part we didn't talk about is
because then any opcode of any expense can just be accounted for in the var ops budget.
And so you can do all the things. Like we don't have to worry about like, oh, is adding like hashing for like this covenants thing going to create some sort of like denial of service vector. We don't have to worry about that.
Right.
You can just hash the stuff. Like we can just have nice things. We can hash things. We can add any size standardized number together. And we as Bitcoiners can do the hard things like figuring out how to make the cost for those and like implement that into Bitcoin Core and give them costs and like move forward as like adults that do computer science, like who know how to do like figure out like the benchmarking engineering of like, okay, this is like, you know, checking X number of signatures, et cetera, should take this long. And we're going to implement it into Core in this way. So we'll know approximately how long it should take across most architectures, et cetera. If you have a faster computer, great. Like computers will get faster. Like that seems fine. We'll just be able to do these things like your ops budget. Maybe we'll change it in the future, right? But he's just going to pick like an arbitrary number and like, you know, we can move it up and down, whatever. And that's going to be like, that's his proposal is my understanding. And that gets back like, so now we can do addition, we can do opcat. It like brings back a lot of stuff. You can hash things, you can do signature checks. And we no longer have to worry about like, okay, is adding this new opcode going to like kill Bitcoin from a CPU perspective?
Right. Because we can just, as long as we fit into the budget correctly, it's fine. It's taken care of.
But now we have like a framework for figuring out what the budget is, like what the cost of those opcodes is going to be, which I think is really cool. So I think it's kind of like why don't we like do this work first and then we can figure out like, do we want CTV? Do we want TX hash? TX hash is basically a more variable version of CTV. CTV is like, okay, here's like the menu of things you can do. We've like hard coded it to these 4 or 5, right? TX hash is like, okay, here's the menu. Pick which ones you want.
Right.
And that's
just
fine.
hashing whatever part of the transaction that you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Commit to this like part of these parts. So it gives you a little more flexibility when you're designing stuff. So it's like strictly it's basically CTV, but like a upgrade in terms of flexibility.
Right.
And that's a proposal. So yeah.
Nice.
So, okay.
Oh yeah. And then as far as the discourse changing, do you have to keep the shitcoiners away from BTC++ now? Has there been any shitcoin incursions? You would know. I mean, because in ordinals, which is already, you know, shitcoin territory, the real shitcoiners, the people who are like, oh, fucking atomicals, fucking DMT protocol, fucking all this goddamn garbage, rearing their ugly heads with their terrible ideas all the time. Has that gotten to you or not so much?
Not so much.
I doubt. I don't think they even, to be honest, I don't even think they have like a code for their own project.
They gotta send the devs though is the thing.
They just have a spec and they have an investor presentation.
But here's the kind of fun thing about Bitcoin++, I feel like. We did have like someone who had been working on the East side come because he was excited.
On
He's
the
like,
what? Sorry?
From the Ethereum.
Oh, yeah.
Like more of an Ethereum dev. My understanding, he'd been working as a dev like kind of in the ETH ecosystem, and he said this was the first Bitcoin dev conference he had heard of, and he was like so excited, like so he was here to like show up because he wanted to like hang out with the Bitcoin devs, which is cool. I don't know, I think it's weird to me that there aren't really other Bitcoin developer conferences. Like, there's the Atlanta Bitcoin conference, which has been going on for like 6 years now. They're having their 6th one, but other than that, like on an international scale, it's so weird to me that there's not. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to do it. I love doing it.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin development has been very unexciting for a while.
People say that, but this is like, this is when I started Bitcoin++. I was like,
you
no,
have the capacity to get very excited about Bitcoin development no matter what is going on. But a lot of people, they want action. They want soft forks. They want crazy new shit. They want covenants, you know?
I'm like, no,
they can't just be
like,
autistically working
proposals.
on liquidity channel advertisements for Lightning.
I get excited about this. Is why I'm like probably the perfect person to be running like a Bitcoin developer conference.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'm like, no, come tell me about the thing you're working on because I know you're doing something cool over there. Yeah, you did. You were like, I was very happy that you came to present at the very first Bitcoin++ here in Austin 2 years ago about your crazy proposal.
Did you know that? Remember how I gave out all these paper wallets?
I remember that.
So those paper wallets that I gave out have started to, the sats on those wallets now have real value. People are calling them legacy sats.
Oh, wow.
And they're inscribing on them. And they actually sell for like non-trivial amounts of money.
It does not surprise me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like it was a rarity. It was like a birth of a rarity event, right? Like that's cool. That's cool. That's cool.
The degens, they'll get excited about it.
I remember you talking because you had the ordinal theory stuff, which made a lot of sense to me. And I have to be honest, every time someone is like, it makes no sense, it's like insane, I'm like, you're crazy. Like, it makes perfect sense. Like, I don't know. Anyways.
It's very simple.
It's very simple.
It's so simple. Anyways, you just put the number next to the set. And they're just labels. I don't know. It's a labeling scheme. But the labels just so happen to be numbers. Anyways. Anyways, I got the ordinal stuff, but you were trying to explain how inscriptions would work because you already had the idea for them, but you hadn't like made them.
Yeah, and the version of inscriptions that I presented there was this weird previous version where the content was not on chain. You had off-chain content and you signed the content as well as the SAT. And then it would like travel with the SAT. And the idea is everybody would have to like trade their content around.
I think this was the part I was confused about because we were talking about it and I was just very confused.
Yeah, that shit didn't make any sense. It's not what anybody wants. And then I just put the data on chain and then everybody got unhappy and that brings us to the present day.
But it made a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, and I think like part of my history is like one of the startups I worked at before I got into Bitcoin was like a early NFT startup, if that makes sense.
Oh, was it?
So I worked at Electric Objects, which was doing digital art before digital art was a thing. Like they were trying to make a screen for digital art and they had like an art club where one of the women, like the other woman who worked at the startup was like one of the first like digital art curators who had been at Rhizome at I don't remember, like New Museum, I think, is like their digital art thing. And so she knew all these like amazing digital artists. And so she would commission like amazing, beautiful digital art that we would put like in the library that you could put on your digital art screen, like maybe a few years before the Ethereum thing happened. So I think she was like, I feel like they were talking about Counterparty while I was working at Electric Objects, and like she couldn't stop talking about rare pepes, and I like didn't get it. I was like, I don't know what that is. I was the Android dev, so I like programmed the device, which was Android operating system, and then I also like worked on the Android app. Obviously, like that, to like control it. But I did that. But a lot of the artists that were there then ended up going to ETH when like NFTs, what is it, BRC? I'm going to say 420.
BRC 721.
It's 721.
Right?
Yeah.
BRC 721, yeah.
It's not 420, it's 721.
BRC 420.
There's BRC 420 now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We shall not speak of that.
Right. Anyways, so all of these artists then became pretty big, and one of the guys who had worked at the startup with me kind of became like a art dealer for ETH NFTs because he bought all these early people that we had known from like working with. I don't know, it's kind of cool. So like, I don't know, digital art makes a lot of sense to me. Like I know it exists. I've seen it.
Yeah,
like,
it's real.
I've touched it with my hands or whatever that's worth. I built like an art like display for it. So when you're like, yeah, let's just like put it in the blockchain. I was like, oh, that makes like perfect sense. Like, yes, people are gonna want that. Like, there's a huge market for that. Like an enormous market for that. Every time I run into like, there's tons of, I feel like it's mostly devs who really are people who really care about the money side of Bitcoin, which makes sense. That they're just like, I just don't think they realize like how big like the art world is, if that makes sense, and like what that market is like.
And also
like,
how entrenched art and collectibles are in so much of human life. Like, I think the problem with a lot of the criticism of inscriptions is it's really just people criticizing something that they think is like tasteless or dumb, but then couching it as like a technical criticism. And it's like, that doesn't work. It's
I mean, ordinals and inscriptions were what made my parents understand like me being into Bitcoin, which like makes no sense. Like I was like, when I was trying to do like a hard money, like inflation argument, they were like, I don't really think like why would that matter? And then ordinals happened and they were like, oh, she does NFTs. Like, duh. Yeah. Like, it like just clicked for them. And like, I think it is because it's like, if you're really on like the dev side of things and that's what you value and that's what you spend your time thinking about, it's easy to assume that everyone else operates in a similar way and they don't at all. There's a huge cultural market, you know?
But this is one of the interesting things about public protocols, which Bitcoin at this level definitely is a big public protocol, is then it becomes, I feel like, the front lines of like a value war, right? Like all of a sudden everyone's values and preferences, especially one that's like a money protocol, like all of a sudden values and preferences and stuff, like what is allowed or permitted in the protocol becomes like the only way you kind of have of like asserting your values, so to speak. And I don't know, I feel like that just explains like so much of the last few years of just like crying and gnashing of teeth. And like, I mean, like, I don't know. Yeah, at some point it's like, at some point like that value split does lead to forks, right? Or like, there's Bitcoin Knots projects, which has like a very like strict view about what their value system says should go in the blockchain, right? And they like are pretty adamant about like constantly updating and having to like change the code to better reflect what they have decided is like permissible per what they believe the protocol should allow, right? And I think you kind of end up with, I don't know, like what is in your protocol and what your protocol allows and like how permissive you are or aren't is like, it all goes back to values. I don't know. That's like, maybe that's like a little bit of a tangent.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's like when there's enough parties with different interests involved in Bitcoin, not just like nerd libertarians who are like computer science people, you know, it's like you're going to get other views on what this is, you know?
And the ordinals ecosystem was a whole new set of people with completely different values moving on to the protocol, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and like,
absolutely.
Using it a lot.
yeah,
you know,
and like actually spending their money, like spending their hard-earned money, you know, like
a Bitcoin circular economy.
yeah, hardest money on earth, and they're spending it, giving it to miners so that they can put their picture on the chain, you know? And that's a value expression, you know? Like it's, I don't know. Yeah. Anyways.
I'm curious, like, you know, so you had all the various opcode cabal meet in a room and discuss, and people proposed their bips and all of that. Like, you know, you witnessed like the proposals, but like, what is the path forward in your opinion from here? Like, where do you think things are actually headed? Because I feel like the models for how Bitcoin has been forked in the past probably will not play out the same way, right? Like, it's a new game, and so I'm just curious. I've heard such a range of like, you know, there's many people saying, oh, we're going to get OpCat this year. It's like, well, how could you possibly know that? You know, like what is the path forward, do you think, for a next soft fork?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And honestly, not one I really spent much time thinking about, because I think at some level, like I'm very a technologist. I get excited about what I think is like a cool new proposal. And at some level, it's like some part of me is like, yeah, the like getting into the soft fork, whatever process will just happen magically, right? Like someone else will make it happen. I don't have to worry about it, which isn't necessarily true, right? I'm not sure what the next thing is. One thing that I really like kind of looking, I mean, the historical history of soft forks is kind of interesting, particularly if you look at like, and it's like, and this definitely speaks, I think, a little bit to like my experience and what I'm doing with the conferences. But if you look at like so if you look at like, okay, SegWit and Lightning were kind of like the two scaling solutions for Bitcoin that came out in like the 2015 to 2019 or 2018 era. Yeah, that's a good period for it. If you look at what actually was happening, at the same time, there was this conference series that's happening twice a year all around the globe. It got like the smartest and coolest and like bestest Bitcoin developers together. And they were talking about how they were going to scale Bitcoin. And they came up with like, I think the SegWit proposal they basically launched there and worked on. And they had like basically these working groups. Lightning got proposed, like the first Lightning proposal, I think, or like pitch about it before the paper even existed, I think was in maybe like the Hong Kong 2015, I don't know, but like basically in 2015. And so like they were talking about these things. And then the first ever Lightning spec meeting happened at Scaling Milan 2016, like 8 months later. So I think this like idea of like getting everyone together, having them talking, working on ideas, like sharing what they're thinking in person.
Yeah, it's
like,
incredibly important.
It's
I don't
really
think people
important.
make any progress on Twitter and mailing lists.
No, I don't think so either. And the thing is with scaling, you know how many soft forks it took to get Lightning?
One?
Three soft forks to get Lightning.
Which three?
So there's the SegWit soft fork,
Yep.
which is one. There's one for OpCSV and one for OpCLTV.
Were those done with Lightning in mind, or were they done? I think they were done before Lightning, though, right?
I don't know, but I think it's in that time period. If
Okay.
you look at it, it's like during the scaling time period, if that makes sense. And both of them were necessary for Lightning contracts. You can't do Lightning without them.
Yep.
So like I would have to like do a little more historical research, et cetera. But like all three of those like were necessary and got done, I think, in that period.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just like, but it was a lot of people coming together talking, and you can kind of see how the mailing list posts are like reflections of conversations, if that makes sense. Like they go and talk about things and then they put stuff down. Like in person really matters.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, Aaron, about like, you know, there's some ordinals developers that came to Bitcoin Plus and like, oh my God, everyone's like nice and reasonable and I'm having a good time. And like, it's like good conversations can happen. It's sort of like, have you seen the GIF with like the dogs that are barking at each other with like the door shut and then they open the door and then the dogs just like stand there and like wag their tails and like, hey, what's up? And then like you shut the door again and they like start going crazy, like barking. I feel like this is like being on the internet is like having that door like shut, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's an important time. Like being able to write things down and express them in written form is like super important for making sure that there's like documentation of ideas and that sort of thing. So I think like online writing is super important. Don't get me wrong, but there's that additional like component of being able to sit down together and just like have the opportunity to feel heard, which is like such such a big part of like, I feel like online people don't feel heard, but when you sit down together, like all of a sudden, like your emotions change and you can like actually make like progress in terms of like understanding what everyone else understands.
I think maybe the worst thing about online discourse is that it gives the illusion of progress. People are out there arguing and making their points and, you know, rebutting each other. And they feel like, oh,
They're
this
like,
is
look how many views I got.
They argue so
much.
They argue so much. There's like
Yeah.
and they just like sit there like bashing each other, like taking jabs. I don't know.
Yeah.
Little like armies form.
My feeling about the current batch of soft forks is that we haven't even at all begun the process of trying to activate one.
Oh, yeah.
And all the conversations on Twitter about like, we're going to do X, we're going to do Y, OpCat is coming this year, are just like pants on head retarded. It's like they just have not happened.
Marketing. It's marketing. It's like manifestation marketing. It's like, well, if we just insisted enough, then it will happen. And it's like,
I totally forgot
what's
people were
the
doing
black
that.
box with
They
the question mark? Like, what's in there that like then results in that soft fork happening?
People really were doing. I forgot they did this, but yeah, there was that whole or we're activating on an XYZ day like announcement on Twitter. Yeah, that's not how. That hasn't been successful either. Like we've seen it. Like people like put it up there and all this energy and emotion and drama and like Yeah.
I think it takes like you know, unsurprisingly, nerd libertarian computer science people are not always the most like politically minded, you know? And I think ultimately we're kind of in an era where essentially you're running like a political campaign and like trying to figure out how to get like something passed or something through. And you have all these different parties like the miners and Bitcoin core devs and the users that you kind of have to like campaign to and figure out which is the most effective group at like getting on your side. And I feel like that's kind of what I think is like the next hump is like you're seeing people, and I mean I know people like Udi have been around for a long time, but like I think like the style that Udi takes, it's like a politician or like a propaganda artist essentially, you know what I mean? And I think that a lot of Bitcoin dev types are just very like A, they're not like into that because a lot of them are more like anti-government libertarian minded, but then B, that's just not the way that they do things in the first place. And so it's just very like those two parties like don't interact with each other and there's a lot of disconnect.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think that's the way things should be done, right? Like maybe this is like putting me firmly in the dev camp. Like obviously this is why I run, you know, the Bitcoin dev conferences is because it's like, no, that's not how we should be doing things. We should be doing things like based on like what we're trying to accomplish at a technical level, right? Like what are we trying to enable? Like what is our goals for helping other, like what tools are we building for people to build contracts in Bitcoin that they're happy about, right? Yeah. And like all the politics stuff, like, I mean, I have seen like devs try and do the politics stuff, right? Like holding.
I mean, Jeremy Rubin is also an example of that, I think.
To a certain extent. Yeah.
He definitely campaigned hard at one time.
He campaigned.
Right? Like,
he leaned into the what if I campaign, right?
Yeah.
And I think that wasn't as successful as he would have wanted it to be, right? So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think at some point we probably will get to, I mean, it's kind of interesting to think of like these dev statesmen, right? Or like a statesman attached to a dev kind of thing where like you're wandering around in pairs trying to like convince people, but...
That's how I feel with Casey. I put him on a podcast to talk about something so boring and technical to most people, and then I make us wear costumes and like try to keep it fun and light, and then like make people pay attention. You know?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen with the soft fork proposal stuff. I don't even have a prediction. You know, that's not interesting to me. I don't know where it's going to go. I honestly like kind of don't care. Maybe I should care. But I don't care because I'm excited about I'm excited that the people who are working on it feel more excited now. Like, I feel like the people who came to the conference and talked about it, I feel like the energy coming out of the conference was really good and productive and excited.
Yeah, that means something.
They're like, oh, we have a direction that we're moving. And like everyone like knows where our North Star is, like where we can like kind of aim towards. And so like, I don't know, for me.
And it sounds like people have sort of aligned goals.
Yeah.
They think each other's goals are reasonable things to want to do, which is very important.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, to me, I'm like, that was a success. Like, I don't know what the next success looks like, but I'm like, everyone's like pointing in the same direction now. Like where they end up like as a journey, like that's up to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is like a pivotal thing. You know, I mean, as I said, it sounds like from everyone I talked to that they also felt that way as well. And like, I think it's the path forward is unclear, but I feel like it can't hurt to have everyone like coming together and trying to make sense of each other's proposals and trying to I mean, I think it just ultimately it like shows that everyone has the same goal.
Definitely.
You know, which is like to improve Bitcoin.
Definitely.
And to preserve the things that make it good.
Right.
And that's like the important thing. And I think like Twitter is like egregiously bad at affirming those shared goals, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, coming together in person is great. I'm a big fan, I feel like, of in-person stuff, even though it is way more expensive and a little bit of a luxury, I think, sometimes to get everyone together. So I'm just like, honestly, I just feel like extremely happy that people wanted to come to my event and that like me inviting them was enough of a convincing to get them to like make an effort to get here. Because some people came from far away and like, you know, Rusty's like all the way from Australia, that sort of thing. So like we had people coming from all over the world just to like come together to talk. And, you know, it's one of those things where like, I don't really take anything for granted. It's like, maybe at some point in the future, I won't be able to get everyone together. And, you know, maybe even the next conference, not everyone will want to come to. I'm like, you know, I like really don't see like one success is necessarily predicting anything for any future event.
And next conference is Ecash. What is Ecash?
That's a great question, Casey. I want to give the Casey story, the Ecash story.
Yeah, go for it. I don't even know what that is.
It's basically like the first time I heard anyone talk about Ecash was, I think it was Casey wrote a blog post on it.
I did write a blog post.
I think you sent me the blog post.
Very possible.
Yeah. I think you sent me the blog post draft, or like maybe you'd published it and sent it to me, because I don't really check your blog that often. This is like the only way I think I would have maybe tweeted it. I don't know.
If I'm not sending you a blog post, it's not worth checking. Like, there's a bunch of garbage on there.
Yeah. And I like read it and I thought it was like, I just remember thinking it was really cool. And then like almost immediately around that time, but like after, so that was like my Nifty's first introduction with Ecash was like a Casey blog post.
And my introduction to Ecash was those like super hardcore cipher anarchist guys. They were working on this project called Script, which was an Ecash, I think like an Ecash like blockchain thing.
Let's get them to Bitcoin Plus Plus in October.
Yeah. I think they are in Germany too.
This is the reason we're doing Ecash in Germany, by the way, is because most of the people that have been working on these protocols the last number of years are all German.
Interesting.
Fun fact. So the Script guys, like the Kale, who does Cashew, which is one of the big protocols now, is based in Berlin. One of the core devs, like I would say like the guy who really took the Fediment idea from like the Blockstream ecosystem and pulled it out and made it into what we now know as like Fedi or Fediment, is also German. So it's like, I don't know.
German cypherpunks. They know what's up.
No, it's like, it's true. I feel like, anyway, so I'm like very excited to be bringing Bitcoin Plus Plus back to Berlin. So this will be our second year, our first ever Ecash conference. But we didn't explain what Ecash is.
Ecash, what is Ecash?
It's cash, but it's electronic.
Okay.
That's what it's like email, Ecash.
You've heard of email.
Yeah, you've heard of email. Well, let me tell you about Ecash. It's a token based. It's like a bearer asset, so it's like cash, right?
Yep.
So that means like if I have $5 and I give it to you, now it's your $5, right? So that's like what a bearer asset is. And it is, I don't know, it's digital. It's a digital form of that. So they use signatures, and they use blinded signatures, which is cool. So the mint can't tell who it's given the cash to.
So it's a banking system. It's a system. It's a bank, right?
It's a bank.
But the bank doesn't know anything.
The bank doesn't know. It's blind.
It's blind. Yeah.
It's a blind bank.
Yep.
It's a blind bank.
Yep. So I think the best way to explain Ecash is like making Coinbase better, right? Or making
Who's Coinbase?
I don't know. You know,
Never heard of her.
Making River.com better.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, making River.com better.
An exchange?
Yeah, making like it's a custodial Bitcoin product. It's making custodial Bitcoin private. It's like kind of not a replacement for self-sovereign, holding your own Bitcoin.
You put your money in the bank and the bank gives you cash.
Ecash tokens.
Ecash tokens.
Right.
That tell you what your balance is at the bank.
Right. But the bank doesn't know what your balance is.
They're digital deposits.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. Yeah. I don't know. I'm excited about it. It is like, it's a little centralized money. That there's a little bit of a centralization factor.
It's trade-offs.
But it's okay if you're like, we're replacing Coinbase or River, not your Bitcoin
That's
wallet.
true.
Then it's like, okay, we're centralized, but we're replacing centralized things, but it's private.
Right.
Yep.
Private centralized things.
Yep.
Yeah. But it existed before. I think Ecash existed as a protocol before Bitcoin got invented.
Absolutely.
And
David Chaum in the 80s actually instantiated it in a company and everything.
Yeah. It would be really cool if we get David at the conference. We're going to. David, if you're listening, you're very much invited.
Yep.
I'm sure he is. Yeah.
We'd love to have you at the conference. We are honored to host you in Berlin this October 10th to 12th. Yeah.
And anyone else who wants to attend, tickets
Anyone
are
else.
on sale.
Tickets are on
25% are already gone.
Yeah,
so
already gone. So
get yours while you can.
Get your fungible, not fungible ticket token.
Yep.
Yeah.
You should run the ticket sales as an Ecash.
I
mint.
really should.
That'd be sick.
I had this idea tickets have already
Insane
been sold.
operational headaches. You should do it for fun. You should make the real ticket like a paper ticket, but you also get an Ecash token.
I should.
Yeah.
I mean, they're PDFs basically. I send people a QR code. The ticket is a QR code that I send you. So
Yep.
that seems doable.
All right, so I think that's it.
This has been great, guys.
Yeah,
Lisa,
thanks
thank
for
you
coming
so
on the
much for
Thanks for
joining
having
podcast.
me
us.
on. Yeah, I hope to see you around Austin more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So this has been another fabulous episode of How Many Pod.
As always.
We leave you until next time. Thank you for joining us.
Stay
and,
hellish.
Yeah, stay hellish, show.
Bye.
Bye.